you're not likely, you're all probably high performers, and thank you to Kelly for opening that up here. But the people in the room here carry a specific type of pressure. Certainly AI is one. It's probably the most obvious and present to a lot of us inside of our organizations. It's changing the way we work. It's changing the way we relate to one another. And for many leaders, our teams are looking at us wondering, what do we do with this? And we don't really have clear answers, even to the impact of what that looks like. Many of us, especially if you're in a position of HR, are dealing with issues of belonging, diversity, equity, and inclusion, of course, but also retention fragility. We're losing people because work is changing so fast. Culture, many of you in this room might be responsible for the development of the culture in your organization, trying to hold everything together while everything seems to be falling apart at the same time, or at least a pervasive feeling that things are changing in a dramatic way. And if you are leading a team, it's very likely that you're feeling the weight of holding other people's well-being. It's probably why you're sitting in this room today. But here's the thing. You're in this room today at a Wellness at Work Summit, which tells me one thing. Well, many things, but it tells me one thing especially, that you believe that people, an investment in people, and a conversation in people is important. And that work can be more than just a transaction. That people can actually thrive, not just perform, inside of their workplaces. So what does it look like then to be a leader who's performing and keeping things together in a time of a lot of pressure? Well, you might still be performing, hitting every number, meeting every deadline, right? Doing what Kelly did, looking great, making things happen, but something inside you has gone quiet, or perhaps even unsettled. Your ideas don't seem to flow as freely anymore. Your energy maybe feels heavier than it used to. You might be second guessing yourself and all that you've built over the last few years. And there's a sense of maybe going through the motions. And if this isn't you, it might be your team members that are feeling this way. And so we go through our work days kind of moving along, but what we used to maybe enjoy doing doesn't feel like joy anymore. It feels more like pressure. And inside of ourselves, somewhere there's an invisible resignation or a quiet quitting, if you will. Probably heard this term before. While we don't necessarily physically leave our workplaces, we do sort of check out. Why? Because we have to. Our nervous systems can only take so much. Now, my presentation today was our purpose under pressure. So let's talk about what purpose actually looks like. Purpose is not about your job title, it's not about your mission statement, it's not about your impact goals, and it certainly isn't about trying to perform all the time. Purpose is the experience of being fully yourself inside your work. It actually is a feeling, or if you will, a state of being, where you're aligned between who you actually are and what it is that you're actually doing. Now, most people actually don't feel purpose in their work. You might, and that would be wonderful, but you might question it sometimes. But a lot of members of the teams don't feel this way. And the reason for that is because we focus a lot on external metrics. We are getting better strategies, implementing new programs, but we're not actually taught necessarily how to access ourselves. And we're not asked the question of, what is a deeper purpose for me in my work? We're shown to perform. We reorganize, we reframe, we add resources, we fund trainings, we build programs, all of that at the level of doing, but not necessarily at the level of being. We keep trying to solve a being problem with doing solutions. Now, crisis in our organizations, they may look like AI, they may look like financial, they may look like people leaving the organization, but ultimately, these are not challenges of strategy, they're a problem of being. So, the field of leadership studies has spent, and leadership practice, has spent billions of dollars trying new things, new programs, getting people to behave in certain ways, studying what leaders do, their habits, the frameworks, all of this. And that's all primarily working at the layer of doing and action. Although, however, most people don't ask the question, who are leaders being when they're actually leading? Now this is a question that stayed with me a very long time, inside of my PhD program, and so I asked the question a lot. And I developed a new definition for leadership. So this is my definition of leadership here. That leadership is an act of creating space for people to be. Leadership is an act of creating space for people to be. Now, this question brings up a few things. What does it mean to being? What does it mean to be? And how do we honor one's beingness? I actually shared this definition at my TEDx talk earlier, last year. Leading from being is much more about connecting with who we are in our essence at our core. And so this definition is the foundation for what I call being-centered leadership. Being-centered leadership is not about doing more or achieving more. It's about reconnecting leaders to their essence, to their being, and if you will, your soul. And creating organizations that actually not only permit that, but support and honor that. Being-centered leadership, again, is not about strategy or behaviors. It's really about helping people to connect. Most leadership development is behavioral, primarily. So at the level of doing, our leadership habits, our leadership styles, fixing structures inside of the organization. And by the way, all of that has value, but it doesn't get to the root of our why, really. How we're working, how we're moving, why we're doing what it is we're doing. Being-centered leadership is ontological in its nature, meaning that it is connected to the study of being. So it changes the question of who are we as we lead. This goes beyond behavior. This goes deeper. And when we connect with our being, and I work with leaders in many organizations across many industries in connecting with the essence of our being, when we do that, leadership emerges more of an expression of being naturally, rather than something we're forcing or doing or trying to perform. So, how do we do this? Because yes, family, this sounds nice, this idea of being, connecting with our being, but what does that actually look like? I'm a very pragmatic person. Inside of my work, I teach 7 capacities. These 7 capacities are the 7 keys, if you will, that we need to develop within ourselves in order to actually lead from being. So the first is presence, which is all about coming into the present moment, your awareness of this now moment, exactly as it is, without needing to change anything or do anything about that. The second is inner awareness. And this is developing a capacity to understand your thought patterns, your emotional patterns, your behaviors, and why it is that your inner world is telling you what it is. The third capacity is embodiment. This is connecting with our body physically. What is our body telling us through emotions, through physical ailment? Are we stressed? How are we listening to what our bodies are telling us? The fourth capacity is deep listening, which is about it's about listening for what is and what is not being said. So listening for whatever message is actually present in that space. The fifth capacity is holding space. So what does it actually mean to hold space for other people? To be, it's a deliberate act of being present with another person and allowing it. The sixth capacity is aligned action. So learning what actually is aligned for us and our energy and our desires, and how do we take action aligned with that versus just taking action based on fear or control or manipulation or performance. And then finally, the seventh capacity, which essentially all of these are building toward, I call honoring beingness. And essentially this is about recognizing the sacred gifts and the unique soul journey in yourself and in others. And so today, I went through these, but we're going to talk really about this idea of honoring beingness. We all have these capacities sort of developed to some extent, but this is how we bring this idea of leading from being into physical form, if you will. Because here's the thing, every person in this room, outside this room, everywhere, has a specific intelligence built into their design. And what I am speaking about here, to be clear, is that you were born on this planet with gifts, with abilities. Every single person has an intelligent design. This cannot be forced, and it only becomes available when people are seen, when we allow ourselves to see ourselves, and when we create space for other people to be seen. That's how we get to actually know what is part of our design. And when we're focused upon that, who are we at a soul level? Who are we at a level of being? It changes the focus of leadership. Not so much about outcomes, manipulation, and control, not the question of how do I get more from my people, but what can I create, what conditions are necessary to support the design of my team. Now, where did this come from? No, I'll come back. I saw you taking a picture. Where did this come from? Well, ever since I was a little child, all I ever wanted to do was be a teacher. My whole life, my young life, my basement was a classroom, essentially. And my favorite gift I ever received as a kid was an overhead projector for my 10th birthday. Yeah. Anyway, eventually I became a teacher. That was a surprise to no one. However, at around year 3, things started to take a real turn for me in my career. I was working in a school district that had really, really poor leadership, to be frank. And what felt like my purpose and what felt like the thing I wanted to do my entire life was actually crumbling around me. And I knew it was kind of a sign, but I decided in June of 2018, I got into my program at the University of San Diego, so I moved to San Diego. And in a matter of 2 weeks, my entire life changed, and I mean everything. From my career to where I was living, a relationship, I left the church, which is another part of my story. I left a master's program for a PhD. I have no time for that today. Anyway, all that to say, when I finally landed in San Diego, I was not doing okay, not in the slightest. And I was admittedly going through a spiritual dark night, if you will. And it was in that time that I was seeking guidance, and my sister suggested that I go see an astrologer. And I thought, okay, whatever. I'm not against it. I had gone to psychics and mediums in the past. That was not like the thing that, for me, I didn't know anything about astrology, but I said yes. How many of you ever had an astrology reading before? Okay, this is my room. Okay, so you might have had a similar experience, but for me, that experience changed my life forever because I felt for the first time that I was seen for who I was, a soul in a body with a mission and a purpose. And she was saying things about me that I knew deeply, but had never expressed before, and never even seen the light of day. And I remember asking her, I said, do you teach? And she said, no. Or she said, yes, I do. I said, will you teach me? She said, no. Okay. She said, you don't need me. In a few years' time, you'll be doing this better than me. And I thought, lady, I'm 6 figures into a PhD program. That is not happening. It happened. And actually, what ended up happening afterwards is I was questioning really the role of astrologers in supporting leaders throughout human history, but also what about astrology helps us understand our design, and what about astrology can help us to understand our being. Now, fast forward a few years, I ended up writing my doctoral dissertation on the use of astrology as a tool for self-discovery in leadership. By the way, I don't know if you know, but the University of San Diego is a Jesuit institution, so we got the Catholic Church, I'm talking about astrology, this is leadership, it was pretty out there. Not gonna lie. But it isn't, because what I understood is that our birth chart is an archetypal blueprint of who we are at an energetic level. And it is wildly practical for understanding our leadership styles, the dynamics between ourselves and others. Certainly we can see things about our communication styles, our motivation, how we connect with other people, what actually are we moving toward in life in terms of growth edge. I use this tool now with leaders individually to understand their design, but also teams, and understand the dynamics that are playing out within them. Because even though I didn't know much about astrology back in 2018. Apparently, maybe the stars were aligned in some respects. Now, I'm not going to go too deeply into the chart, but if you've ever looked at your birth chart or had a reading, there are two things inside of the chart that are very important, specifically related to leadership, and actually your life's design. The first, and there are many, by the way, but for today I'm just going to pull these two out for you. The first is our South Node. And by the way, this goes far beyond horoscopes you see in the newsletters and what you see on YouTube videos. There is a depth. It is ancient esoteric knowledge that helps us to connect with, well, the cosmos that we are a part of. And there's a lot in the chart, but these are the two things I want to pull out for you. So the first is the South Node, which is the South Node of the Moon that I'm speaking of here. And the South Node in our birth charts show us where we have been. It is our default, our comfort zone, if you will, in our lifetimes. When we are under pressure, we generally lean on these habits of behavior. This feels deeply familiar and almost always where you go to first when stress is activated. Now, I didn't know about this, of course, until I started looking myself, but the placement of my South Node in Cancer in the 10th house explains a lot about my emotional overextending and wanting to perform and achieve all of the time, early part of my life. But the North Node tells us something different, what we're actually moving towards in our lives. Now, if we were looking at it from an evolutionary perspective, it's where our soul is going, but from a leadership perspective, this is the growth edge that we're moving towards. Pressure is actually what activates this area of the chart. So, for a lot of people, this is actually what's being very activated right now inside of our organizations. Now, there are many things, as I said, inside of the birth chart that help us to understand our dynamics as leaders, but this is generally the place that I start. So, I want to ask you again, perhaps thinking in a different perspective, what does it cost a human being to spend years doing work that has nothing to do with who they actually are? And what would it mean for you and for the people that you lead if the gifts that you were born with were finally the thing that you actually led from? And if someone could show you that precise design, your gifts, your guiding north, the patterns that you reach to when you're under pressure, what do you think you would do differently in your work next week? We're living in times right now of great change, and leading with purpose doesn't mean that we have all of the answers. It doesn't mean we're not affected by change. It means that we know who we are when the ground is shifting between us. Today is World Happiness Day, and I believe that genuine happiness at work is possible if we are willing to lead from a different place. And that place is from our being, from the conviction that the people around us carry something sacred, a design that deserves to be honored, not just optimized away. Because I do believe that the most powerful work we can do as a leader is learn to honor our own being, and in return, honor the beingness of others. So, the question I'd like to invite you to carry today is, what would it mean for you to lead from your being today? Into every session, into every conversation, every moment you find yourself here, because the world does not need more leaders that are good at the game. It needs leaders who are connected to the truth and that are willing to honor being. That is the work, and it starts here. Thank you.